that is where we are right now with the preparation and positioning of our personnel, supplies, and equipment. Are there any questions?
Mayor.
Does have everything it needs?
It's fair. If you're going to close all the roads in the airports, can you guarantee that all the residents are going to be able to get food and water and medical supplies so we can get through this?
How much is this going to cost? This has been a tough year financially. If you're wrong and the flooding isn't as bad as you predicted, won't the city have wasted a lot of money buying and moving all of this stuff?
Disasters are both complex and inevitable, and can overwhelm communities of all sizes and types, often without much warning. Local leaders have a critical role to play in the success or failure of how a disaster is handled. Today, more than ever before, traditional and social media create instant access to an unfolding disaster, shining the spotlight on a leader's every move. This spotlight puts leaders under extreme pressure as they are called upon to make rapid decisions based on imperfect information. These tough decisions have to be right. Their constituents' lives and safety depend on it.
If you're going to change the outcome of the event, think of 72 hours from the time the event occurs. You're often going to have to make decisions either right then to do something, or particularly with a hurricane, several days out, if you're going to have resources there in that first 72 hours. So this is where it gets very difficult for people to say, I don't want to make a mistake, I don't want to spend money I don't have to. That is going to get them in trouble. They need to change that around and going, will I get there fast enough? And when's the last possible moment I can make a decision and still change the outcome?
The underlying key to managing all aspects of a disaster is the successful execution of a well-prepared and exercised logistics plan, getting the right things to the right place at the right time, under the worst possible conditions.
Leadership should understand that logistics is really what the Emergency Operations Center does. If you have an emergency management operation and you're the city leader, the mayor, or an official who has authority over emergency management, you recognize that logs is not only some separate and apart operation. It's really part of what the Emergency Operations Center does. And it supports not only recovery, it supports response. It is a life safety aspect of the overall program of emergency management.
I don't think you need to be listening to.
It looks like the river's cresting upstream. Based on the latest computer models, we can expect significant flooding.
Let's get everyone together in the Emergency Operations Center.
There are some basic truths about disaster logistics that every leader needs to understand in order to properly support an emergency operation. Disaster logistics will not make or break an operation. It can only break it. Even if you do everything else right, if you do not have essential resources where they are needed at the right time, your response effort may come up short.
But logistics becomes your overriding demand, particularly when you're dealing with large area impacts of getting critical supplies into communities, because the ability to make it safe, the ability to get in and do search and rescue will ultimately fail if we don't get the supplies in there to stabilize the community, because the losses will continue.
During a disaster, your community will be competing for scarce resources, including supplies, food, water, medicines, equipment, expertise, and labor. All communities are trying to get as much help as they can, but none ever get as much as needed.
You can't wait to order stuff after the disaster, and you can't make it up. You either know what you're going to do and you have a plan and you've exercised it, or you're going to fail.
Once the incident is upon your community or the impacts are known, you have probably missed the opportunity to get supplies and resources in place and in time to meet the most basic needs of your citizens.
I think we should wait before we spend that kind of money.
Wait for what?
Until we're sure that it's as bad as everybody thinks it's going to be.
That'll be too late.
On life safety issues, I get it. But if people have to wait a little longer for water or even go without power for a few days, so be it. We simply can't afford all this, and there are no guarantees that the state or FEMA or anybody else is going to reimburse us.
Nobody is talking about providing for every single need. But a few strategic purchases made right now will make things much easier for everyone. Mayor?
We've learned lessons from past disasters that can be applied to any emergency situation. Avoid these common mistakes. Don't assume you're ready. You're not. Even the most refined logistics plans need to be tested, exercised, and revised. Each disaster brings unique challenges that will push the limits of any plan.
The other thing that we found, for example, we use school buildings, city-owned buildings, for our shelters. We opened 82 shelters. And we realized that schools want to get back in action. They want to open up the next day. It became a challenge. It will not be as much a challenge here in 2012 because we have dealt with that issue and added more refinements to the plan that allow us to get in more easily with additional labor and get out more easily with additional labor and then move on.
Don't expect others to handle your resource needs for you in the immediate aftermath of any incident. Be prepared to be on your own for the first 72 hours before state, federal, or voluntary organizations can reach you. Make sure that you are prepared to be as self-sustaining as possible in these initial days.
FEMA's role, again, will be through the governor's request for assistance, is to backfill and support the overall response. But we're not going to be the fastest resources. It's going to be the things that you have, that you've made arrangements for, the contracts that you led, the relationships you have with the private sector, and the resources you have in your warehouses. That will be the first things that get there.
Don't overcommit. It's tempting to give answers that people want to hear. However, too often, promising then failing to deliver on badly needed resources, even for perfectly understandable reasons, can cause a loss of credibility which may be difficult to recover.
I guess what most surprised me during the whole relief effort, and it shouldn't have been a surprise, is how willing some people, particularly officials, are to get in front of a TV camera to say things that confuses the public, confuse the issue, and frankly make a mess of things.
Mayor will address the press in 5 minutes.
It's been tough. People need some good news. I want to be able to say that we will definitely be set up tomorrow at 9 a.m. to start handing out water and ice to the people.
We have about half of what we need on hand. The rest should be here in a few hours.
Miss Mayor, we need to be very careful about promising too much to the public at this point. Conditions are getting much worse. What if the highway's closed and the supplies don't get there when they're expected? The press will be all over you. And more importantly, the community will think we do not have this under control.
So what is the right message?
Now, let's consider some actions that leaders definitely should take. First, make sure your logistics plan includes consideration for all the variables that your community may face. For example, when stockpiling food and other commodities, you must know how much you will need, how long it will last, where it will be stored until needed, and how it can be safely accessed during an incident. You will also need pre-designated facilities like warehouses, staging areas, and even points of distribution, or pods, located strategically around the community to provide needed supplies directly to your residents. As a leader, your job is not to do the planning. It is to make sure that it gets done.
We plan operationally. In talking about logistics, you should ensure that your logistics center is established. You have the staffing, the facility, the technology. You've trained. You've done all the things that say, when I need to turn on a logistics operation, I've got everything ready to go.
Next, you will need adequately trained staff. Depending on their size, most communities have a wide variety of specialists on staff, such as planners, social workers, inspectors, accountants, and more. However, very few have full-time professional logisticians. Therefore, you'll have to identify and train staff in the basic principles of disaster logistics. Consider recruiting staff who may not otherwise have a role during a crisis to perform these functions. Finally, empower your emergency managers to do what they do best: coordinate.
Well, if you've had your plans in place and if you have a good Office of Emergency Management, You have a good core of volunteers. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do. The best thing the leader can do is stay out of the way.
Many of the unique and complex logistics and resource management challenges that arise during a disaster can be overcome by enlisting the help of a wide variety of stakeholders. Your emergency managers are already tapped into these networks, so encourage them to leverage all available resources and to be creative in solving problems.
They should have the confidence in the emergency manager that this program is essential to save lives. They should understand that in the end, emergency management and logistics support the life safety operations.
Although you may have to rely on your own resources in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, you can work now to better prepare for the future. Among the greatest resources of any community are its residents and businesses. Furthermore, in every community there are businesses whose daily operations involve logistics, supply chain, and resource management functions, most of whom will be ready to help during a disaster if they understand how and the proper arrangements are made in advance.
In a place like Harris County, where we have a lot of logistics firms, third-party logistics firms, there's so much expertise that if I have enough notice, I can call any number of people and say, can you be in Reliant parking lot and can you handle the logistics operation? And to them, it's almost like child's play compared to the supply chain that they support day in and day out.
We need to work cooperatively to fill the gaps the private sector cannot address and not duplicate what they can get up and start running.
In times of disaster, your community can expect significant help from non-governmental, faith-based, and other voluntary organizations. Many have robust disaster response and recovery programs and can provide a wide variety of help with resource needs.
In terms of volunteers, there are so many organizations out there that want to volunteer. Faith-based, non-faith-based, some just corporations where they get their employees. The best ones are the ones that say, you know what, we have 300 people, where do you want them?
State emergency management agencies play a critical role in disaster logistics. When a community's resources have been overwhelmed, the states are always ready to provide essential support. Each state has its own specific processes for requesting and providing resource support, so make sure that you and your emergency manager know how and when to ask.
But during Hurricane Ike, it actually worked pretty well. FEMA had their role. The state government did I think a wonderful job of making assets available to us. And then the local government took over and the decisions were made locally as to what needed to be done.
The State Emergency Management Agency is also the conduit for help from the federal government. And again, well-defined processes have been established for FEMA and other federal agencies to assist. Remember, these state and federal agencies will be bombarded with requests during a large-scale disaster, so it may take time and you may not get everything you asked for. Anticipate your needs and be precise in your requests. Waiting too long and then asking for too much may not produce the best results.
How are we doing so far?
We were able to get most of what we needed, but we definitely have shortfalls on generators and emergency fuel. And if the flooding had continued another day, we may not have been able to meet the demands for food and water on our own.
So the basic plan worked?
Yes, but we have a long list of after-action items, especially in logistics. We need to start reworking the plan now.
Well, congratulations, Miss Mayor. You've just completed your first exercise. Congratulations.
You made the tough decisions. Congratulations.
So, when is our next exercise?
You know, one of the things you find in large-scale plans that you very rarely have a chance to exercise or test these plans on a full basis. They're too big. You can do full-scale exercises, you can do functional exercises, tabletops, but you never see it all together. You don't really know, as I said earlier, that what the plan can actually do until you test it live.